I mean, it was blaming officials, not shaking the hands of Josh Allen, having a complete outrage on the sideline from the absolute right call from the officials. Buffalo wins this game 20-17 over Kansas City. I picked Buffalo last week on Brandon's World. Josh, I told you right here last week on Championship Rings. My Eagles played Kansas City and Buffalo back to back. I said the Bills were the better team. And I told you, be wary of this Buffalo team. Ever since they fired offensive coordinator Ken Dorsey, Joe Brady has gotten Josh Allen back to what he was under Brian Dable. The Bills, they're not running the football as much as I would like them to, but they are using James Cook a little bit more. Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis aren't even doing a lot of the offense. A lot of Dalton Kincaid, Dawson Knox. But Buffalo just looks really good right now and really scary.
Yeah. If Buffalo gets into the playoffs, I don't want to play them. Do you?
No,
No.
and what's interesting though is when they play Jacksonville, who they obviously met up with in London. That was a game where the Bills were just off. Would they play a Miami team who they have obviously already beaten this year, and they play Miami in Miami week 17? Could
Week
we
18.
or week 18, excuse me? Could we go a back-to-back scenario where you're in Miami 2 straight weeks? That's very possible. Do they play Kansas City again? They are very comfortable going into Kansas City and winning games. And I talked about this last week, and I believe that you agreed with me on it. Is Kansas City this year? I still think because they have Patrick Mahomes, because they have Andy Reid, because they have Travis Kelce, they absolutely can win the Super Bowl. Nobody's counting them out and saying they can't. But they are a different offense this year because they have to nickel and dime you down the field. They have no explosive elements, and we saw it when Isaiah Pacheco was out this week. Outside of Travis Kelce, he may be their most explosive element on offense.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously, Kansas City, they did their trick play. Kadarius Toney was offside. They're upset about it. It was a great, job by Kelce to recognize that. But at the end of the day, like Buffalo outplayed Kansas City for 3.5 quarters, and they really tried to give the game away to Kansas City, and Kansas City could not take advantage. And they were too rattled by the officials to realize that, yes, that's a penalty, but the old Chiefs back in the day when Tyreek Hill was there, it's 2nd and 20. It's fine for them. Now 2nd and 20 or whatever it would be, they cannot convert that. And that's the biggest difference between this version of the Chiefs and the last sort of part one, if you will, of the dynasty as they head into part two.
The other difference is they don't have Juju Smith-Schuster, which now that he's not there, you see how valuable he was to Kansas City's offense last season. But the Chiefs, I have to say it, the Chiefs got a taste of their own medicine this week with the offside call. Because how many times going back to the Super Bowl, and I can point to the Jets game, I can point to the Vikings game. I'm sure there are other games where the Chiefs should have gotten called for a penalty of some sort, and they didn't. And everybody's like, why are you not calling this penalty on them? And now Kadarius Toney gets called for the offside, which was the correct call. It was. And you see the Chiefs are all up in arms like, how can you call that? Like, how we should have gotten a warning and all this and that. And it's like, hey, Chiefs, it's time you got a taste of reality.
Now,
No.
generally, what we know about these situations is when wide receivers line up, they will typically look to the referee close to them. They will ask them, "Hey, am I on the line of scrimmage or am I offside?" And the referee will either give him a thumbs up, or he will tell him either scoot back or scoot forward, whichever way to make sure you're still on the ball. And we saw it last year, if you recall, a game between the Giants and the Commanders where Terry McLaurin checked with the official to make sure he was on sides, and the official still threw the flag. The officials are not required to give you a warning. They expect that you know how to line up, especially in week 14 in the NFL. I know the Dolphins had a situation last night where, it looked like Tyreek Hill lined up in the same position and the referees missed the call. We get it. I understand that's where the frustration comes from. Yes, the NFL needs full-time officials. We all know it. We know the NFL won't do it. Let's just get over it now. We know officials make bad calls. But at the end of the day, like I said, the difference to me was in the Super Bowl, Philadelphia played well enough to beat Kansas City, and they got robbed out of a chance to go win. Kansas City was driving. They did not even play well enough to beat Buffalo. Buffalo kept handing them chances instead of running the clock, and Kansas City could not take advantage of that. And I do hope that we get Buffalo, Kansas City again in the postseason, whether it be in a wild card or divisional round, because the animosity between these two teams now, if you thought it was high after the classic 2021 playoff game we got, it's even higher now.
You know what's interesting, but also unfortunate, is because the Dolphins lost, guess who still has a path to get the number one seed?
The Kansas City Chiefs. And
It's
I'll tell you what, it's not far fetched because basically what would need to happen would be Jacksonville would need to beat Baltimore this weekend, which I'm not saying they will, but it could happen. San Francisco would need to beat Baltimore. That can absolutely happen. Baltimore would have to beat Miami, which we all know can happen. And then Kansas City would have to win out against New England, Vegas, the Chargers now without Justin Herbert. And I know they have one more very easy game on that schedule, but I can't think of it right now. Oh, it's Cincinnati with Browning, which is a winnable game in their house. It is New Year's Eve, but it's a winnable game if the Chiefs go undefeated. Baltimore loses twice. Miami loses once. The Kansas City Chiefs are the number one seed.
God, I hope that does not happen. I want Mahomes to have to go on the road at least once during his
Well,
time going.
okay, well, let me say this. Let's say, to me, it's more important that Baltimore gets the one rather than
Oh yeah,
than Miami. If Miami gets the one, Kansas City could have a great shot to still be the two and get home field because I think Miami could get beat in the divisional round. If Baltimore gets the one, I think they'd win a playoff game coming off a bye. Kansas City at Baltimore in Baltimore for an AFC championship would be a fascinating matchup.
I would favor Baltimore in that game. But looking back at going back to this game, I know we'll get more into the Cowboys Bills game in a minute. But you're talking about Miami. Buffalo still has a chance to possibly win the AFC East. If the Bills can beat the Cowboys, the rest of their schedule, other than the Week 18 game down in Miami, the rest of their schedule isn't that intimidating. So I would say the AFC East is not out of question for the Buffalo Bills.
I'm gonna be very fast. So, what is Buffalo one game back now of Miami because of that loss,
Let me look. Let's see here.
or are they two? I thought they're still 2 games back.
So Miami is 9-4 and
Buffalo
Buffalo
7-6. So,
correct.
so they're 2 games back, which is what I thought. So essentially, Buffalo has to win out. Miami would have to lose that game to the Ravens week 17, and then they would also have to lose to Buffalo week 18. The
Which I
problem's
think
going to be
is a strong possibility. Here's the rest of the schedule for the Bills. They've got the Cowboys in Buffalo. They've got the Chargers without Justin Herbert. I think Buffalo wins that game. They've got the Patriots at home. Okay. And then you're at Miami. That's
uh,
not that's really not a
I
daunting
think at
schedule.
Miami week 18, I told you this. I told you this a few weeks ago. That's setting up to be the last game, Sunday night football, that will be flexed in. And I don't care if Miami lost to Tennessee last night. It's very hard to go down there in Miami in December to go from cold to warm and win a ball game. We've seen Belichick teams struggle with it for years. I think the Dolphins could beat Buffalo at home and win the AFC East. And that, depending on the wild card scenarios, what will Miami need? Is Miami going to be locked into seeding? If Buffalo loses, are they out? It's going to be all fascinating to see what happens before that game because that really is going to dictate to me who wins the game.
Yes. There's a lot of big games down the stretch. Um, great job by the schedule makers playing these big games at the end of the season. But let's get to the right. Oh, no. There we go. let's get to the rest of the Week 14 action. I want to start with the game right here in Cleveland. Jacksonville 8 at Cleveland. Browns get the win 31-27. David Njoku was the MVP of that game for me. I get that Joe Flacco had a great performance, but David Njoku, I think, made the key plays for the Browns, scoring those 2 touchdowns early in the game that really gave the Browns the momentum. That
One of them was on a completely busted coverage. I think the linebacker thought somebody else was guarding Joku. They were in man. Nobody went within Joku. Completely busted coverage. The other one was a great catch, great run, great finish. And Josh, I know this a couple weeks ago. It's funny, right? I mentioned to you, I think it was before the Denver game. Everybody said Kevin Stefanski's the coach of the year, and I said there's no way he's the coach of the year. They lost to Denver, they lost the Rams, they look really bad. What Kevin Stefanski has done, Deshaun Watson, Joe Flacco, Dorian Thompson Robinson, PJ Walker, 4 starting quarterbacks this year. I'm here to say it. If the Browns make the playoffs, Kevin Stefanski is not only the coach of the year, but unfortunately, for some Browns fans out there like myself who are very hesitant on Stefanski, I think he actually gets a contract extension.
I don't know about that, but I understand your reasoning.
Listen, if you go, do you know how we all know how hard it is to win in the NFL? How many upsets did we see this past week? 8 underdogs,
Oh,
1 outright. If you make the playoffs, if you get to 10 wins with 4 different starting quarterbacks, your 230 something million dollar quarterback had a broken shoulder since week 3. PJ Walker's on a practice squad. DTR can barely make the team. Joe Flacco comes right off the couch from raking leaves, literally, and is winning you ball games and looks like the best quarterback the Browns have had all season long. That's a hell of a coaching job.
okay. I actually want to stay on this Joe Flacco conversation for a minute, and then we'll get back to the rest of Week 14. But it was funny. Walking out of the stadium following that game, fans were chanting Flacco, Flacco for obvious reasons. I get it. But here's how I feel about this whole thing. And hopefully you understand. Because it makes sense. This is one of those things that makes sense in my head. While I'm rooting for the Browns as a whole, and I'm rooting for the players around Joe Flacco, because of Joe Flacco's time with the Baltimore Ravens and the fact that the Ravens beat the Browns multiple times when he was the quarterback, I can't get myself to root for Joe Flacco.
That makes no sense as a Browns fan.
I know.
As a Browns fan, that makes absolutely no sense. That's like me saying, I'm trying to think who like Kyle Ward. That's like me saying if Kyle Ward went to the Eagles, God forbid, back in the day, and Kyle Warren led the Eagles the playoffs, I wouldn't be rooting for the Eagles because Kyle Warren used to play for the Cowboys. I always say I never want a Cowboy to be an Eagle, but when they do become an Eagle, I absolutely root for them. Obviously, DeMarco Murray was a disaster. We're not here to talk about that. But to me, I don't get that logic. Joe Flacco is your starting quarterback. Joe Flacco is more than likely at this point, Josh, going to quarterback the Browns in a playoff game. And it could be at Jacksonville, and they are beatable.
I know. Again, this is one of those weird things. Like, I just can't get that history out of my head. Like, the fact.
So somebody asked me this question: what if Joe Flacco goes on another 2013 run and wins the Browns the Super Bowl?
Okay, first of all, that was 2012, not 2013.
Okay, but it happened in 2013. It was the 2012 season. It was the 2013 playoffs. Obviously, the San Francisco Super Bowl, the lights went off in New Orleans. We all know the story.
I loved that Super Bowl, by the way. That's
what Joe Flacco got himself paid after that. And, Flacco, I said it, he was sitting on the couch for, 13 weeks for a reason. He looked so bad with the Jets, it looked like he couldn't play anymore. It is once again, as we speak, the power of offensive coaches. Brian Dable winning with Tommy DeVito. Shane Steichen winning with Gardner Minshew. Zach Taylor winning with Jake Browning, Kevin Stefanski winning with Joe Flacco. You want to talk about a takeaway? That's my biggest takeaway. We're a defensive coach, and Mike Tomlin and Pittsburgh can't even beat a helpless New England team with Mitch Trubisky.
The other big takeaway for me is, where did this come from, New York Jets? And Zach Wilson.
Did I not call this game? Did we talk about this game or no? Because I know I talked about it on Brand's World. I don't remember if we talked about it on Championship Ranks. So my brother, who lives in Colorado, I love him to death. He texted me this past week. He said, my best bet of the week is Texans. I said, no, don't bet it. I'm very weary about this game. I said, I think the Jets are going to win the game. I think Zach Wilson's going to have the game of his career. And I've been telling you for the last month, I know CJ Stroud leads the league in passing yards. He's been great as a rookie, but you've watched them over the past few weeks. Did not play well against Arizona. Did not play well against Jacksonville. Barely played decent enough to win that game against Denver, and did not play well and left the game with a concussion against the Jets in the fourth quarter. We all liked Houston about a month ago. Houston has not been the same team since Tank Dell left the lineup.
I know. You could also. No, I'm not going to say Tank Dell should be in the MVP conversation, but let me say it like this. Let me say it like this instead. Like I said, David Njoku was the MVP for the Browns in their game against Jacksonville. I would say, I get CJ Stroud has been great, and I was, going crazy for him and all that. If I said Tank Dell is the MVP for the Texans, what would you say to that?
Well, the problem is he's missed games because of injury. And I get your point, but it's also like you need the quarterback once again. And it was a rainy game, so I'm going to cut Stroud a little bit of a break.
Sure.
But I'll say this. If that's the Zach Wilson we see from the New York Jets from now on, that was a completely different Zach Wilson. He was getting the football out. He was confident. We know that there were rumors out there about Zach Wilson maybe did not even want to play, worried about getting hurt with the Jets offensive line. My biggest takeaway from this game was that, and a lot of people want to talk about the Browns defense, and I told you last week the split differences with their home and road. To me, outside of the Niners, the best defense consistently in the NFL this year, week in and week out, will always give you a chance to win, is the New York Jets. They can shut down any offense when they want to, and when they believe that they have a chance to win a game, they know if the quarterback can give you 14 points, they have a chance to win the game. It was the right decision to go with Zach Wilson. Aaron Rodgers should not play for the rest of the year.
Absolutely not.
It should be the Zach Wilson show. Let the kid develop and let the kid be a backup, because we've seen Zach Wilson. He played well against Philly. He played well against Kansas City. He played well against Denver. He's going to have up and downs, just like Jordan Love is going to have up and downs, just like Justin Fields is going to have up and downs. We've seen these young quarterbacks go up, down, up, down. Maybe we need to give these guys a little more confidence. And by the way, once again, it would help Zach Wilson if he had a freaking offensive coach.
Yes. So I have one more takeaway, and then I'll turn it over to you. Detroit.
I tried telling you. Did I not try telling you the Bears are going to win this game? I tried telling you Jared Goff does not play in cold weather. He cannot play in cold weather. That will be the Lions' fatal flaw. That's why the Lions absolutely need to win the NFC North, which is now completely in question, not only by Minnesota, potentially Green Bay, and who knows if Chicago can get on a run. Very dangerous game here for the Browns. Chicago at Cleveland. I'm fascinated by it, and I don't even have it on my list this week. That may be a little bit of a spoiler alert. But very interesting in the NFC North. But I tried telling you that Lions defense is not as good as what it's been over the past few weeks.
I don't get it.
I do. They play bad teams.
Yeah.
What good team did they beat? Like they should have watched to Chicago. That's what I said. They should have watched Chicago in week 11. They barely beat the Saints if we're going up 21-0 on them in the blink of an eye.
Yeah. And we saw what happened with New Orleans, or just the NFC South as a whole, because now 6-7 Tampa Bay is leading that division. But honestly, whoever wins that division is just going to lose to the loser of the NFC East in the wild card game. So